Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David KRAYDEN. I'm broadcasting to you live from Ottawa. When we come back, a couple of administration things to deal with, then we're going to get right to my interview with Dallas Brodie. I think you're going to like this.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Now, we're going to be talking about a number of things in this interview, but the primary focus is how Aboriginal title could effectively take your property, your house away, not just in British Columbia, but across Canada. This is toxic, dangerous, and BS. There's no such thing as Aboriginal title. It's got to be eradicated from the Canadian political system. If you want to know more about that and other things, have a look at my recent Human Events article. Yeah, it's a bit of a provocative title. Canada's First Nation should accept the fact that they lost the Indian Wars. But of course, we talk about land acknowledgements all the time, like it never happened, that they still own the land. It's unceded. Crap, nonsense, rubbish. But we'll talk about that more in the interview. If you have a chance, if you're in the Ottawa area, rally to support Universal Ostrich Farms, Wednesday, November 5th. That's tomorrow, 11 to 2, 1400 Maryville Road, Ottawa. Easy to get to. CFI headquarters. We know what you've done. Thank you for sending this announcement to me. I am going to do my best to be there. And I don't mean I'm just going to try. I mean, I have somebody coming in to look at a window tomorrow. And literally, that's what's happening. So if I can get that done, I will be there. I will be there. Thank you for sharing that with me. And we talk about the ostrich farm in this interview. I'm not very optimistic about Thursday morning. It's 9:45. The Supreme Court of Canada will announce whether or not it will hear the appeal of Universal Ostrich Farms versus the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. I'm not optimistic about the Supreme Court. And there might be some alternatives, there might be some options, but I'm not going to discuss those right now. We'll discuss those in further length tomorrow, but enjoy this interview. I rarely meet a politician who I am so in sync with. And Dallas and I are incredibly in sync on these policy issues in terms of what's fundamental to Canada. So thank you for watching. Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David KRAYDEN, broadcasting to you live from Ottawa. And it's a real pleasure today to have the interim leader of the OneBC Party. That's a new phenomenon in BC, and we'll be hearing a little bit more about that. Dallas Brodie, it's so nice to have you with us today, Dallas.
Thank you, David.
And I must say, I don't know a lot about the OneBC Party. It sounds good to me. I'm from British Columbia. I hate to say I'm still in Ottawa after all these years. Born and raised on Vancouver Island. My father was an Air Force officer at Comox. I was an Air Force officer at Comox as well, and I spent 9 wonderful years there. And so it's I'm still hoping to get back to BC. Although I must say the province does not look politically the way it used to for me.
Yeah, sure.
But but hopefully people like you are going to make a difference. So if you can tell me briefly, how many members have you got now within this new party, the OneBC Party? And I assume these are disaffected members of the Conservative Party who are coming over. Is that mainly what's happening?
Well, what's happened is I was expelled from the Conservative Party in March of this year for making the comment that there were 0 bodies at the Kamloops Indian Residential School supposed grave site, and a following podcast that happened. So I was expelled, and 2 other members left the Conservative Party at the same time for their own reasons, but in support, but also because the Conservative Party was having serious internal issues at the time and continues to have those. One of the other members, Tara Armstrong, joined me with creating a new party called we decided to start a new party, and we've named it OneBC, with the idea being that we want to be representative of all BC, OneBC, and one of our primary things is to remove all race-based laws from the province and start having everybody rowing together in the same direction and having a party that's for all British Columbians, not just for if you're this group or that group. So another person who left at the same time was Jordan Keeley, who's from Fort St. John, which is up in the northeastern corner of BC. And he is sitting as an independent, but we're really on good terms with Jordan. We work together. He just wants to remain independent for now. And so for right now, it's just the 2 of us, Tara and me, forming the party. You need 2 people for a party. For example, the Green Party has 2 members right now as well in the legislature. And the benefit for Tara and me of having formed a party is that when we were sitting as independents, we only had 1 question every 3 weeks in question period, 1 question each. So now the 2 of us, we get a question every day based on the precedent created by what they granted the NDP or the Green Party. And so it's been really effective for us. And we've been doing a lot of work and punching above our weight for sure, given it's just 2 of us.
Well, it sounds great. I think if the leader of the Conservative Party refuses to act like a conservative and shuts his members up about issues that are controversial, I think you have to move elsewhere, because otherwise you're going to be very frustrated. But what's happening right now, I have a map here. I think most of my viewers are very familiar with this. I've been talking about this for quite some time. This is basically the area that the Cowichan First Nation claims, and it includes prime waterfront property in Vancouver and the Port of Vancouver, as well as many, many private dwellings,
Yes.
single-family units, homes. And I have to say this, Dallas, because I have been studying what Native self-government means for Canada for at least 25 years. And I've always said it was going to come to this sooner or later. Because when you have identity politics in a country, and you have a province like BC, where anywhere from 90 to 105% of the land is claimed by First Nations, it's a recipe for disaster, catastrophe, and chaos. And sooner or later, we have to get back to what I would say is equality under the law. And that doesn't exist in Canada. We keep talking about reconciliation, like everything happened last year. Yes, there were injustices done, but we have poured billions, hundreds of billions of dollars into Native reserves, which I would argue, and I'm not putting these words in your mouth, I would argue are not being used for the efficacy of the people, but the chiefs are always there with their hands out, and I think there's been gross misuse of funds over the years. I would like to see a Canada where everybody's equal under the law, where Native people can be encouraged to be just as equal as everybody else, and to be as Canadian as everybody else, and to stop having a race-based hunting and fishing system, a race-based judicial system, because really, I think in Canada we have a system like Animal Farm, where some Canadians are more equal than others.
Yes.
And that's what it comes down to right now with this Cowichan land grab. And I'm going to call it a land grab. This is horrible. And I just want to play this clip here because, here's a guy who thought he owned his land, and apparently he doesn't.
1975. I grew up in Richmond. I elected that guy.
Do you have a mortgage on your property here in Richmond?
I do.
Have you spoken to your lender?
I have.
And what have they told you?
They are not renewing it.
Wow.
I mean, that is absolutely frightening. And it's happening across the country now, because now we know there's a band outside of Ottawa and Quebec that are saying, well, it can happen in BC, it can happen here in Quebec, in Ontario, because native title means native title. So we're not talking about treaty rights anymore. We're talking about an aboriginal title that just says it's mine because my ancestors lived there. Somebody set foot on there. And I wrote a column about this a couple of weeks ago for Human Events, which is an American publication. And they asked me to write this from a Canadian perspective. And I said, this could be chaotic, not just for Canada, but around the world, because there's not a single country in the world that somebody else didn't own at one time. So to me, it comes down to, and I've heard people say, well, you can have Aboriginal title at the same time you have property rights. And I'm saying, nonsense. It's one or the other. What's your take on that, Del?
Well, to come back to your very first point you made when you just started speaking was that if you've been watching what's been going on for the last 25 years, you're absolutely right. I knew it was going to come to this as well. As soon as the Delgamuukw decision came down way back when was it the mid 80s or late 80s, I remember thinking that this is not going to work out well. And now I say to people, it's now right here in front of your face. This is now up in your grill. You can no longer avoid the truth of where this was always going to lead. And people say, well, how did this happen? I said, well, basically, what I would say is 25 years of, I'm going to just use the word cowardly politicians who didn't want to face this head on and have the long-term vision to show where this was going to lead to, kept kicking the ball down the road, hoping that it wouldn't rise to the surface on their watch. It's such a political hot potato that no politicians really want to deal with it. I'm dealing with it now, and boy, is it hot. But I'll tell you something. Then, so what did they do? They left it to the judges. And because of Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982, the whole rights around all of this has been developed by the courts, which are notoriously stuffed with left-wing thinkers who have no skin in the game. So they're just making decisions because they think, well, this sounds right. And nobody ever put an end to it. And so here we are. We are at the end of the road. And we now have a judge in BC, Madam Justice Young, who said that I can't really say what's left of fee simple title. These titles are now defective and invalid. And here we are. These people woke up last week or 3 weeks ago to find out that they no longer have a valid title to the properties that they've owned, some of them for, like that man said, 35 years. He's paid property taxes on it all those years. He's improved it. He's probably renovated it. He's taken care of it. And now he finds out that he can't even renew his mortgage because the banks are saying the title is now no longer clear or firm. And anyone who's owned property, you know that if you buy a property, you want to have fee simple. Fee simple is the highest level of ownership you can have in our country, and it guarantees you that the piece of land that you have is yours. You can deal with it, you can sell it, you can renovate it. I mean, yes, there's zoning rules and so on, but it is yours to deal with as you please. And the lawyer for the Cowichan Nation actually gave an interview and said, well, it's true. If one of the people who owns these properties wants to sell it now, we get to approve that sale, or maybe we won't approve it. Or maybe the other implication of that is like, maybe we want a cut of the sale proceeds. And so these people are now at the meeting last week that was held. Over 500 people showed up for a meeting in Richmond that was held by another Brodie, Malcolm Brodie, who's the mayor of Richmond. People were saying, well, what does this mean? If I don't own my property now, do I have to pay property taxes? And if I can't sell my property now because nobody wants to buy these properties, and some of them these are $1 million, $2 million plus previously valued properties, are you going to lower my assessments down now to reflect that it's worth zero now? So I don't owe any property taxes anymore because the assessments have to be adjusted downwards, because property assessments are based on fair market value for the most part and what sales in the area have gone for. And these are legitimate questions. And I understand a class action lawsuit has now been launched this morning by a lawyer who's representing the property owners. I haven't read the details of that case, but basically to say, you owe us money for the loss of our land and what we now own, which I can't sell to anybody because everything's in flux. And the other problem, yes, the BC government has said, oh, now we're going to appeal this ruling. But as you know, that this ruling, what's come out now is that the BC government and the federal government, both who were parties to this case that went over 500 days, if you can even imagine a 500-day trial. It started back in 2014. they did not advance the strongest arguments they had. And the strongest argument against these claims by the Cowichan Nation was the argument of what's called extinguishment, which essentially means if you haven't been on the land for more than a X number of years, you've extinguished your right to claim it, which makes sense, right? It's if you've been gone for a long time, you haven't defended it, then it's not yours anymore. But David Eby, who's now our premier in BC, issued a directive when he was Attorney General some years ago, telling his lawyers that they were no longer allowed to advance that argument. And Jody Wilson-Raybould, who was the federal AG at the time, did the same directive. So basically, they pulled their strongest argument. It's not a surprise that the Cowichan won now. And the BC government is saying they're going to appeal it. But you know how long it takes to go through the courts. It could be 2 years before they get to appeal. And then it'll go to the Supreme Court of Canada, another few years there. And in the meantime, what are these property owners supposed to do?
Well, languish, obviously, then. And David Eby, of course, did absolutely nothing to stop this. He's encouraged it. You think of 10 years of Justin Trudeau, almost 10 years of Justin Trudeau, reconciliation. He never even thought about what those words meant. Meanwhile, he's watching Indigenous people who can't even get safe drinking water on their reserves. That's not the problem. It's reconciliation. It's about these imaginary grave sites that we have to acknowledge. But it strikes me as, I don't know if you watched the speech from the throne in Ottawa, and I was there. And of course, King Charles was in town to read Mark Carney's words. And I don't know if it was the king's idea, because he's a very woke king. He's a very politically correct king, or if it was Mark Carney's idea. But there was the land acknowledgement at the beginning of the speech from the throne. And here's the head of state saying, the land we're sitting on really isn't ours. It belongs to this tribe over here. And we have been doing this for so long. These woke Canadians, these idiots who are totally delusional. No, I'm sorry, it was ceded. It's not unceded. It was ceded over a century ago, and it's ours. I can't even go to my local Rotary Club meeting anymore because I'm sick of hearing this land acknowledgement that my house belongs to somebody else. We're sitting on the unceded lands of it. And when you talk like that long enough, somebody's going to take you seriously. And apparently, First Nations are taking this very seriously. They've been doing this. They've been gearing up for this for decades. And the pushback to me is almost absurd. We have David Eby saying, we're going to appeal this. Yeah, right. To the Supreme Court of Canada, which is even more woke than the BC Supreme Court. Yeah, are they going to stop this? Of course not. It's not their land. Maybe if their land comes up for auction, maybe they'll be saying, well, maybe we'll look at it differently. But to me, this is a result of so long of Canadians in general thinking it's somehow reconciliation to pretend history isn't history and reality isn't reality. And we've been doing this for so long. I mean, in the meantime, not only the landowners, but who the hell wants to move to BC?
Well,
if you don't know if your house is safe, I mean, why would you want to move there?
It's such a massive problem. I mean, it's keeping me awake at night because we're out here going, what have we done? And just a word about the land acknowledgements. I knew this was bad when I first heard the first one. I said, this is not good, because basically you are being groomed into surrendering yourself and also accepting that your ancestor did something wrong. This is not okay. You don't do that in a thriving, healthy country. It's been, our party, OneBC, introduced a piece of legislation, a bill last week called the Land Acknowledgement Prohibition Act, saying that any publicly funded body, whether it's a school or any organization that is like, I don't know, let's say the symphony orchestra that's having things in their publicly funded, they are prohibited from doing these ritualized speeches. And of course it got voted down. 2 people from the Conservative Party joined OneBC. So we had 5 people voting in favor of it, and the rest of the entire House blocked it before it even got through first reading. But you would not believe the response we got about this. People were so excited to hear finally someone saying, please get rid of these things. And in my speech, when I was introducing the bill, I said, this is an anthem to a suicidal nation. And I don't know why we think it's good to keep feeling ashamed of ourselves. This was an incredible country, and we did the best we could. People back then were doing the best they could at the time. Presentism is a very dangerous thing to do. Judging 150 years ago by the standards of today, or even 50 years ago, you know, like right now, so many people in Canada have people helping them who are from the Philippines with their children. Watch in 100 years, they'll say that was wrong to do that. You can't do this, look backwards and judge people. What we can do is do our best to amend things as we can. But here's the problem. The money and all of these transfers of power and land and money have not been benefiting the average Native person living on these reserves, or the Natives living off reserve in Canada. It's been staying at a very high level. And we refer to this as the reconciliation industry, which is comprised of several groups. The money, land, and power is going to chiefs and council, lawyers, tons of lawyers, accounting firms, major accounting firms, and then land developers and consultants. And this has become a massive boondoggle. It's, you know, law firms that used to make their living off of, you know, having whole departments dedicated to a forestry department in a corporate forestry department, and working for Cominco or other big Weyerhaeuser or West Fraser, or these big logging companies now have these massive Aboriginal law groups. And so it's become an industry. And I know our party has worked on a documentary that is supposed to be, our first screening will be December 1st. That's the hope time. We have two very brave Aboriginal men who came forward and spoke on the thing, saying it's not helping the people. None of this. It's sitting at the top. The reserves are in as bad or worse conditions than ever. In British Columbia alone, the lifespan of Native people has dropped by 6 years since the NDP took power 8 years ago, actually 9 years ago now. So 6 years drop in lifespan for Aboriginal people. So all this money spent, you have to ask, what's going on here? Where is this money going, and why aren't the people doing better? Everybody in Canada wanted better things for Aboriginal people. There's not a person who didn't. But now they're starting to say, well, wait a second. After all this money and energy and effort put into this, we're no further ahead. In fact, we're worse than we were before.
Yeah, exactly. The unemployment is higher.
Yes.
The addiction is higher.
Yes.
The living conditions are worse, and the chiefs keep getting richer.
Yes.
These are all, and most of these people are lawyers, and they know how to use the system. They've been using it for years. I'm so glad to hear you say that, because yeah, the average Indigenous person is worse off than ever. They're not seeing a cent of this money. And it's been that way for years. And of course, if this goes ahead, who's going to get richer? Well, the leadership, the Native leadership will get richer, and the lawyers will make billions of dollars off of this. And I just want to show a clip from you in the legislature. And when I saw that, all I can say is hurrah.
If don't take away the homes of British Columbians, then this government will. This government is doing the bidding of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples by voluntarily giving away Aboriginal title across this province. They gave it away to the Haida last year. They're giving it away to the Seashell Band right now. And they're holding secret talks to give it away to who knows how many more as we speak. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Premier. How many bands is he currently in talks with about giving away Aboriginal title? No lectures on reconciliation, please. Just the number.
Minister for Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Well, I'm really glad that our high school system and our education system teaches about Indigenous education, teaches about Aboriginal rights and title, teaches about the true history of this province, because it's clear some people have not learned anything from history. I'm sorry that some members didn't get the chance to learn about the true history of this province, the rich history that goes back thousands upon thousands of years, a rich history full of vital culture, vital language. And, you know, Honourable Speaker, if the member chose to learn about that history, her life would be better too. Our province would be better too. So, you know, Honourable Speaker, treaties are an important method that we find that certainty. It's a way of finding agreement of how we work together and how we live together. It's a path of honour and a path of peace. And I would urge the member to look to how we find agreement to work together, as opposed to focusing on trying to divide us so we fight each other. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
What an incredible cop-out. He did not, and of course he didn't answer a question, he didn't even try to. So, like 100,000 people, you know, which is probably the population of BC when the Europeans arrived on the continent. They should control every last square mile of the province. That's the mentality here, and that's the rich history he's talking about. It amazes me how people like that, and he didn't use the R word. He was tempted, I'm sure, to say it's racist to suggest that Native entitlement, Aboriginal entitlement shouldn't give them everything they want. But of course, if you look at it in a rational way, it's the Aboriginal leadership that is racist about this, because they want a two-tier justice system. They want laws to apply to them that apply to nobody else. They want to be a law unto themselves in many ways. And that to me is racism. When everything is race-based and we don't judge people by the content of their character, but by the color of their skin. It has been turned on its head. You know, Martin Luther King famously said, I want an America where I am judged by the content of my character, not the color of my skin. We have a Canada, and especially a BC, where people are not judged by the content of their character, but by the color of their skin. This is the worst kind of reverse racism, I think, in the world. And it's an apartheid system that has been created. Call it that, and people say, how can you say that? It's nothing like it. It's exactly like apartheid. We've run apartheid in this country for so long, and this is going to cement it. So, but I'm going to ask you.
We refer to them as communist ethno-states because what's happening is the people who are stuck, the Native people who are stuck living on the reserves don't get to own their own property. So it's communal property, and they are punished if they ask questions about we've been told this. Like, I have people phoning me saying, thank you. I mean, the chiefs would have you think that they're all representing their people. Actually, I'm hearing from Aboriginal people who say, thank you for bringing it up, because when there's a problem on the reserve, they have nowhere to go. If they go and complain, guess what happens? Sometimes their hot water gets cut off. Sometimes they're fired from the council office. Sometimes they're, they have different ways. They get complaints about the orderliness of their yard or whatever it is. And these things happen, and they're stuck because they have nowhere to go, because that's the government they have. And it's a small place. And imagine the futility you feel when you're in that situation. It's terrible.
Yeah, and it's almost like the futility these homeowners must feel in Richmond. And it's the same phenomena. We have a government that just wants to punish people, and it's incredible. We could have such a beautiful country. It's the one I remember growing up in, where we believed in something called equality. Private property was sacrosanct. I think the federal government, and it won't happen under a liberal one, but perhaps under a conservative government, needs to put private property in the Charter of Rights, in the Constitution, so it's guaranteed, because it's not right now. We have to rely on protocol in terms of private property rights in this country. That shouldn't be that way. And certainly I hope this creates a need for that to happen, because we really do need that codified.
Well, we certainly need the federal government also to remove UNDRIP, and BC has also taken the next most horrible step, which is embedding UNDRIP right into our province. No other country in the world has done this. I think Bolivia has, but they introduced something called DRIPA. They took UNDRIP, which was sitting up here, and they pulled it right down into our province. It's called DRIPA, the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, which basically said all of our laws had to be rewritten to align with UNDRIP. Incredible.
That was my next question, actually. So do you think if we extricate ourselves from this United Nations treaty, is that the beginning of the end, or does that put us in a much better position?
Well, in British Columbia, what OneBC thinks needs to happen is immediately defunding of all voluntary payments to Indigenous bands immediately. Also, and stopping of any voluntary land transfers that we're contemplating, because a lot of the payments going are just voluntary. We're not bound to do that under any treaties or requirements. Next step is to repeal DRIPA out of British Columbia, then say that, and then make a declaration that UNDRIP does not apply in any way, shape, or form to our province, and then demand of the federal government that Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982 be amended or removed. And finally, that the Indian Act be repealed, and that all of the bands operate basically as townships or municipalities and be sort of regularized in that way going forward, so that they are, because under the Indian Act, the problem is when you give joint decision-making authority to a band together with an area, which is what's happening in BC right now, the chief and council under the Indian Act has a fiduciary obligation only to its band and none to the other people in the area that are now in its territory. So you can see why that's a problem. They've got authority over you, but you have no way to vote them out if you don't want that. And so that needs to go.
You see public opinion coming your way on this. I read a column the other day by Vaughn Palmer in the Vancouver Sun, and I couldn't believe Vaughn Palmer still writing for the Vancouver Sun. I was a kid reading Vaughn Palmer when I was growing up in Comox, and he's still writing. But Vaughn Palmer is not a conservative. He certainly didn't support the old Social Credit Party. He didn't support the Liberal Party.
No.
He was, if anything, I think, left-leaning. But even Vaughn is saying, hey, maybe we should have been told about this. So if I'm reading Vaughn Palmer in the Vancouver Sun saying something's wrong here, are the people in BC generally waking up to what's going on? Because it's so easy to say, oh, I just want to, I just want to reconcile. And like, you haven't already? I grew up with people from the Kwakiutl, from the Haida Band on Vancouver Island. We all got along. We never looked at each other as, oh, you're Indian. Or you're the white guy. We never looked at each other that way. We had a racially benign society growing up in school. I had the most diverse bunch of kids growing up. We had Japanese Canadians. We had black people. We had lots of natives. We had a guy whose father came from Portugal. Very ethnically diverse. But you know what? We never saw ourselves as different. We were just growing up together. We were kids going to school. Race didn't matter. I'd like a Canada again where race doesn't define us. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity or color your skin is. We're all Canadian. We're all equal under the law. Do you think people in BC and BC, I think, unfortunately, has gone crazy in the last 10 years? Are people realizing the gravity of the situation here?
Yes, I think finally people are waking up. It took a long time, but a lot of these things, these land transfers and things were always happening in sort of northeastern BC, way up in Dawson Creek or somewhere way up in Haida. When the Queen Charlotte's name was changed to Haida Gwaii, people sort of thought, well, okay. And I think the politics of appeasement was sort of like, well, okay, we'll just do this and maybe this will be okay. We'll just do this. And of course, I think there were good intentions along the way. Hopefully there were. I don't like to believe this was purposeful, but the road to hell was paved with good intentions, and here we are. I do believe that people are waking up. The Cowichan decision has taken people by shock. They actually are shocked. And can I just mention that apparently 2 applications were made to notify the private property landowners in the course of this over 10-year case, and the court denied both requests to notify landowners. And so the only time a lot of them found out was when Mayor Malcolm Brodie, no relation, probably same Scottish clan, but no relation to me, sent out letters to people in his city saying this is what's happened, and people saw this letter. So it was like 2 weeks after the decision came down, and then announced this open hall town forum last week, which was filled with more than 500 people showed up. So yes, people are waking up. I think they can't believe this is actually happening. And today we had another deal roll out that the government's given away yet another gigantic chunk of land, 4 times the size of the city of Vancouver, to a band, plus $150 million. Like, it just goes on and on. And so it's not slowing down, it's speeding up. And I don't know where we go from here. We have a plan that we would roll out, but we're 2 people in the legislature, and if the role we're playing is to bring this to people's attention, then that's really important too. And we've got a big problem out here, David. It's a mess.
Yes.
It's a mess.
Well,
not to mention it's affecting our economy, because big uncertainty is the capital doesn't like uncertainty, as you well know. Capital,
yes, well, that's for sure. And I think you're probably going to see an exodus of people leaving BC because they don't. The uncertainty affects them too. And I think a lot of people will go to Alberta, where they know the government will be a little stronger in their opposition to this kind of nonsense. But is this going to bring the David Eby government down potentially? Is the Conservative Party? I know you left it, but are they showing any political courage on this, or are they afraid of being labeled racist for opposing Aboriginal title? Are they showing any kind of courage, any signs of stopping this?
Well, the Land Prohibition, Land Acknowledgement Prohibition Act, we got 2 Conservatives to vote with us, plus Jordan and Independents. That was 5 of us against the rest of the people in the House. But a glimmer of hope came 2 days later. We introduced another bill called the Protection of Private Property Act. And all of the Conservative Party voted together with OneBC. I couldn't believe it. I was like, this is amazing. This is great. Finally, a victory. And I was very, very happy about that. And so that's progress. But today, one of the Conservative members celebrated this brand new deal that's been rolled out with the Kitskalam band in her riding, saying this is a wonderful victory. And I'm thinking, no, it's not, Claire. Her name's Claire Rattay. And she's in the Skeena riding. It's not good news. This is another giveaway. And I think part of the problem is nobody really knows what reconciliation means anymore. It sounds nice, but maybe it should be, I don't know what the word should be used, but it's not really reconciling anything. And I get people writing to me and saying, Dallas, when are we done reconciling?
Well, no, that's it exactly, because it's not reconciliation. I mean, I never had a problem with Native people, Indigenous people, and there was no issue. So I didn't need to reconcile. And reconciliation can go on forever because it's a process being controlled by the chiefs, by the lawyers, as we've said. They love the idea of reconciliation because it doesn't mean reconciliation, because the average Indigenous person is not benefiting, as we've said, and it's the leadership that loves this because they'll keep this ball rolling for as long as they can, because it is a cash cow, and that's what it comes down to. And it's appalling. And in the process, people are suffering, people are dying, needs are not being met, addiction is not being helped, basic problems of living are not being dealt with because it's all about reconciliation. It's become it's a political football, and this ball keeps rolling. And thanks to people like Justin Trudeau and of course Mark Carney's on side with this, I would like to see Pierre Poilievre take a much more Reform Party based principled stand on this, which means no race-based fishing, hunting, judicial system. We're all equal under the law. He's not saying that because that's controversial. Shouldn't be. But I thank God that there's people in the BC legislature like yourself who have the courage and the moxie to stand up and call a spade here. This is not reconciliation. This is not benefiting average Indigenous people. This is benefiting the leadership, and it's hurting Canada. It's destroying this country. We could potentially be headed for incredible strife and conflict, potentially civil war over this, because nobody is safe. Nobody's going to know if they own their backyard and their house anymore. And it's because of weak leaders like David Eby, most of all in BC, and most of his predecessors who did nothing except nod their heads every time this issue came up. And I think the worst prime minister in history on this file has been Justin Trudeau, who has probably never even had dinner with an Aboriginal person, unless it was at an official event, and had no concern at all about the conditions at reserves. And in fact, at one political fundraiser, actually poked fun at the situation at reserves, said, "Oh, they don't have clean drinking water? Haven't they caught up to the 21st century yet?"
Oh, gee.
Absolute disgrace. But it's the hypocrisy of politicians who are using this as a political wedge, as a political tool for continually getting reelected. And you heard that in the legislature. But thank you for showing the courage here, because if you don't stand up, if somebody doesn't start doing this, I don't know where the country's going to go, because How many more years have we got of David Abey and the NDP? Because he's being propped up by the Green Party. So how many more years have we got? Three years left?
He's got about three more years, and I can only hope that we just continue to make inroads on this, and maybe there will be some brave NDPers who see the light and say enough's enough. You never know. I've heard there's some problems in their caucus as well, and people are starting to go, this is not great. So you never know. Politics, I've learned, like, I'm really new to politics, but boy, things move quickly in politics, and things can change literally in a 24-hour cycle. But I will say that taking a stand on this issue comes at a cost. Like, it's been, even today, the Union of BC Indian Chiefs is demanding that Dallas Brodie resign. Like, I'm taking it constantly, like, demanding that I resign. For what? Because of my terrible behavior and misuse of public office, and they just can't stand that I'm even. So it's like no one's allowed to speak any other opinion on this file except for theirs. So that's, to me, called totalitarianism. We are supposed to be a country where all views can be. I may not win the argument long term, but I have the right to make this argument. I'm in the legislature. This is a major file. It's damaging the economy of British Columbia. We have to talk about it. But so far, everybody's been cowed into not talking about it. And even, I agree with you, Pierre Poilievre needs to get on his big boy pants and start talking about this issue and calling a spade a spade. We can't continue as a country in like this race-based system. It's got to stop. I mean, even Pierre Trudeau and Jean Chrétien tried to introduce the white paper in 1969 and said this has got to stop. They knew this was going to be a problem, but the Assembly of First Nations, got up in arms and said, nope, we want the Indian Act and we don't want to remove the race-based system. And that's why we're here.
Interesting. I'll get you out of here in this, Dallas. And I wanted to ask you this because you're obviously watching from British Columbia, and I've been watching for the past 6 months, been on the phone daily with the folks at Universal Ostrich Farms in Edgewood, BC, and the beautiful Kootenays. I know the area just north of Kelowna. Beautiful area, little east of Vernon. Yeah. And of course, the CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, has initially was going to call, I hate using that word, slaughter hundreds of ostriches because they may have had avian influenza H5N1 last December. They clearly developed herd immunity. They clearly are healthy ostriches today. One has died. The herd seems to be diminishing. We're not sure. The CFIA won't say what's happening. They won't count the birds. They won't test the birds. They won't let the owners even feed the birds. So that there's been since September 24th, it's like there's been a cordon placed around that farm by the federal government. And it's been horrifying to watch these birds not being treated, being subject to animal cruelty, being maltreated, not being fed properly, not given water. One ostrich died because the electrolytes weren't supplied. And it's been absolutely horrifying. And as I said, I've been talking to this family every day, and especially the spokeswoman for this farm, Katie Passatney, who has done a hell of a job getting her message out about what's happening here. And it's heartbreaking because on this Thursday, November 6th, the Supreme Court will announce its decision as to whether it will hear the appeal from Universal Ostrich Farms. If they don't decide to hear that appeal, it could be, and I'm not saying definitely, but it could be game over for these ostriches, and the CFIA could begin their completely irrational, unnecessary, and idiotic slaughter of these healthy birds just because they want to, and it's part of their program. So I just want your comments on the situation.
I went up to the ostrich farm about, I guess it was about a month ago now. I got so upset when I saw up there. I just exploded, and Rebel News covered that. But it is terrible what's going on up there. There are over 100 police officers up there, and guarding 400 ostriches. As I said, you'd think there were 400, Paul Bernardos in that pen. They've got so many cops up there. these are ostriches, and they've got tape around it, and they won't let Katie even go into the pen and see her birds. She loves these, like, they know her. They each have a name. Imagine if all your dogs were in there and you weren't even allowed to see your dogs now. It's animal cruelty at a very base level. And then the bigger problem is the incredible government overreach on this. Why won't they test the birds? What's wrong with testing the birds? They won't even let Katie test the birds. It's not expensive. It's not difficult. It's nothing. So what are they hiding here? What is it that they don't want to address? They're so determined to slaughter these birds, and they won't test them first. Apparently the eggs and the valuable information that can be gained from these birds is there. And why not, instead of turning it into a slaughter zone, turn it into an experimental study area? Like, use it. It's 150 kilometers away from any other farms. There are no other birds that are going to get sick from this. These are flightless birds. They're in a corral. They don't go anywhere. And it's so sad when you're up there to see what's going on, and how you can tell that the birds can tell if something's wrong because they're not able to see the people who love them, and that it's a terrible situation. And the government seems to just be determined to do this, to say, we can do this, and we're going to do this no matter what the citizens want or say. And I think it's very hurtful to small farmers who are, I know that Katie, if it was turned out that these birds were really sick, she would participate in the ethical euthanizing of these animals. She's not some crazy person. She's a normal small farmer who cares and would do the right thing. But right now, none of the birds are sick. And I think when I was up there, it was 260 days. They had been free of any virus. And now it's probably been up to more like 270 days. So you have to ask yourself, what is really at play here? And what powers are really at play? I think that's what we'd like to get to the bottom of.
Yeah, 290 days actually, and it's just more absurd as each day goes by. I could go on and on about this. It's heartbreaking and it's sad, but it's also just absolutely angering, because what they're up to. This is about government control. This government has been warring with farmers and a war against agriculture for so long. It's tragic.
It is tragic.
But I tell you, Dallas, you're fighting for BC. Thank you. I hope to come home someday. You're fighting for my home province, but you're also fighting for Canada. And you're fighting for freedom. And I take my hat off to you. I applaud what you're doing. Thank you for having the courage to fight. And you remind me a lot of Katie. I tell her that every time I talk to her. Thank you for having the courage to fight, not just for your farm, but for Canadians and for freedom, because that's what she's doing. I think that's what you're doing, Dallas. Thank you so much for continuing the fight. And let's stay in touch.
Okay.
And I want to know what happens with this story just as much as I want to know what happens with the ostrich story. I think it's incredible. But thank you for joining me today. God bless you, and God bless your work.
God bless
what you're doing.
David. Thank you. And as I say, we've only begun to fight. Yeah.
I like to hear those words. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Okay. Bye-bye.
And that, of course, was Dallas Brodie, MLA in British Columbia, Vancouver Writing, and the interim leader of the OneBC Party. What a fascinating conversation. What a dialogue. What an interview. I enjoyed that so much. I was so happy to share that with you. And yes, we're watching to see what happens Thursday morning. As I've said, I think a number of times in the last couple of days, I'm not terribly optimistic, because it's the Supreme Court. I have some suggestions for Katie and the farm. Whether or not they want to listen, I don't know. Sometimes my advice isn't always necessarily desired or accepted, but I'm always willing to help. But I think this is going to be a groundbreaking decision either way on Thursday, either for the good of this country or the evil of this country. And we need to pray for justice, because, as I've said 100 times, what's happening in this farm is what's happening in Canada. What's happening to these farmers is what's happening to all Canadians. What's happening to Katie and her family is what potentially could happen to you and I. So let's keep fighting. Let's keep believing. I'm just going to put the store on. I'll be right back with some concluding remarks. Thank you. And we will be back tomorrow. Thank you for watching today. Budget, 4 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll probably be back with some comment on that. Depending upon where this goes, the government could fall. But we'll see. And it could fall by accident, simply because the government has not been talking to Don Davies and the NDP. Sorry, thought I had an extra here to play, but it doesn't seem to be playing. We will be back again. back again tomorrow. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. This has been David Crayden, broadcasting to you live from Ottawa. See you soon. Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I am going to keep this station on the air. I am going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible, as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David Crayden, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist